thinking about your design fiction, I want to reiterate kind of the importance of this is, I'll pull up this slide. If you remember from last week, we talked about this guy who ran a carpet manufacturing company and pretty much did the design fiction model and came up with like a really bold vision of what his company could achieve, and then started to work away at it. And we talked about this adaptive cycle model. So just to like frame it too as like a context, we're looking at systems change of like, so in some cases really rooted systems and really rooted behaviors that kind of govern behaviors and really govern behaviors and really govern behaviors and really govern behaviors. I'm gonna mute you, Leora.
God, this thing keeps kicking me out. So sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Is it cool? Like, do you want to jump on Bria's, or are you good on yours?
It's just hard for me to see a little bit. So I think I'm gonna end up doing that. I keep thinking that my system's gonna cooperate with me. But yeah, I think I'll just look at Bria's and then I'll have my board open, which is still
okay. We can support you in setting up your screen too if you want.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, no, I have my board, but nothing in it.
That's cool. I think as long as your computer's muted and sounds off, we should be fine.
Yes, should be now.
You could. Okay, cool. Awesome. Hey, Mason. Glad you could make it.
Yeah, hello. I'm kind of in and out, but I'll be fully on board by about 1:20.
No worries. Okay. Thank you. So yeah, just this adaptive cycle, this thing's called the panarchy, and it's talking about, you know, there's systems embedded in systems. And so if we want to change big systems, I think the real point of this visual is to highlight like the best, most effective ways to do these small scale interventions and have small scale interventions that can be really disruptive. And two models that I think are really powerful to reflect this are, I think of Airbnb and Uber. I know that it's like not great. It hasn't been great, but the way that Airbnb made this like small app that leveraged underused homes, and it totally transformed the hospitality industry. And Uber did the same thing. It's like this real small scale app that kind of found its niche, became very attractive, and it totally changed, you know, paid transportation. So that's kind of the context, but I really want to start with hearing kind of where your heads are at with your own design fiction. And like I said, there's no formality to this. I just would love to hear kind of what your vision of your future looks like. And I'd love to hear from everyone. So unfortunately, everyone's going to be kind of put on the spot, but if anyone wants to go first, you're more than welcome.
I got minutes now, so I could go first.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thanks, Mason.
Yeah, so everybody, I struggled, you know, right after classes knowing about the design fiction, even though I've done this exercise a few times. I guess kind of my focus in looking at this hasn't been something tangible like a specific product or you know, it's more about principles and outcomes that we can align, and specifically, you know, the body of work that we're all kind of tangibly related to, whether it be biomimicry or Aina Aloha economic futures principles, or leadership principles, or just indigenous principles in general that we can see across, you know, the globe, and how they intersect to create, you know, a new paradigm, new future, is something that I've been working on with a book that I'm putting together. So it's been a lot of my focus in the last year is is sort of my own journey and how those pieces have all sort of interconnected to what it is I focus and spend my time on, what I'm committed to seeing for a future. And so I had reached out to Jamie and said, like, shoot, I don't know, how do I approach this? And really, the serviceberry analogy I thought was really good. It was helpful because what the suggestion was like why don't you approach this from like developing a story of the future. And I thought, oh, that's a good first step because I'm not sure how to approach this. And anyways, it ended up being really sort of this story of the future as I see a model developing. And this model is, I actually think this is Teleki's story, not my story to some degree here, because I when I wrote it, I was, I wrote it because it was sort of related to my book, but I think it has so much to do with the fish pond and the evolution of the fish pond as an example, as a model of abundance. And so I think that what I really sort of got out of it is the principles, our indigenous principles embedded within this story that I feel like are really important. I think they land really well. Principles of sort of regenerative future and how to create multiplier effects that we always talk about at the fish pond. But I also think it touches upon like these aspects of life cycles and what we are missing from as humans in understanding our relationship to these life cycles. And so we build so much to preserve, to protect, to control, rather than evolving with our surroundings. And so as we look to the future in the context of what it is I wrote, it talked about everything from being able to live, like within and on the fish pond, and or within, and what kind of technology we can integrate from that standpoint, but also being able to step really quickly in between these two worlds of knowing like or being connected to Aina at just a like footstep apart from being in your off-grid zero net home. But also what it translates to in what it is we're investing in and how much we've progressed as a community with building the next generation of leaders. So much of the work that I'm focused on is on the individual practicing it first in order to build the capacity and resiliency for themselves and these principles so that they can apply it to the real world. And so those, I don't want to take up all the time for it because I know we got lots of people to kind of go through it, but in general, it's really trying to, I think the outcome for me was beneficial from the standpoint of I was able to like articulate like at least 20 years, I'd say 15, 20 years down the road as to what the abundance model expanded version would look like. I'll stop there, Jamie. There's more, but I don't want to run out of time.
No. I appreciate you kicking this off, and I did read. So everyone knows I read Mason's story today at my lunch, and Mason, would you be willing to audio record it and share it with us?
Two terrible things I like to do. I don't like to look at myself on TV, and I don't like to hear myself talk. But yeah, I can do it, man. But I'm still working on it. Like I think it's evolving too. Like I had said in the last meeting that what I want is to like hit the 2 billion that you mentioned, right? Which is the tipping point to create change in the world. And I do think that's what we have an opportunity to do here is to change the world. So what does that look like? Expanded even further than the 15 to 20 years of my own perspective. What are my future ancestors doing in in 2 lifetimes from now, perhaps maybe less. I don't know. So yeah. Anyways, yeah, I can do that.
I mean, I would love it. And I want to just frame the context. Like, this is for us as a community to kind of like, I think your story is very powerful. Like I said, I got goosebumps when I was reading it. And we could use it as kind of uh, an opportunity for feedback. Like I'd love for other people to kind of just like share what they heard or like how they experienced it. It'd be cool to get Paleke's input. So just the audio would be used as like a tool for evolving it and supporting you, not necessarily for sharing it with anyone. But I think having it captured in your voice would be really powerful. And I really, I think you do a great job. And it reminds me of the Robin Wall Kimmerer. If you listen to that essay, hearing it from her voice just has a lot more power than just reading it. So also use a lot of the Hawaiian words, so it'd be nice to connect with those words as well. Cool. Yeah, I think just to give you more context, like the way Mason framed it was just like firsthand perspective. Almost like walking through a day of his, like what would it be like in a day in this design fiction, which really it makes it very visual. So it was nice to read. Does anyone else want to follow that?
I kind of started off on a similar path, so maybe I could go. So I kind of gave myself to it and did things how I naturally do things, which is all over the place, make a big mess, and then try to break it down in parts. And it kind of following along with what Mason was saying, I started looking at these larger design systems, educational design system for supporting community, infrastructure design system, for, where requirements support the resources, materials grown, health systems, recycling, upcycling went all over the place. And then I started to remember these examples that I've seen as I was Googling, best urban natural systems around the world and things like that. And, was kind of looking at wetlands restoration types of projects where wetland restoration is integrated into the design of these urban areas. Like in South America, they have some places like that where they have boardwalks and things that traverse over parks that lead into your town center areas and just looking at those types of designs for our community. And then I went all over the place because of the Welt discussion in there, looking at flowers and my favorite ants that can do everything and are so strong. And then, the thing that got me was looking at flowers and how, flowers for consideration on the Welt, description and everything. They kind of like AI, they have all these different triggers for how they live and they move and they respond to their environment, and how they work with their pollinators and are just really more responsive to things like that. And then it got me thinking, sorry, again, this is how my brain works. Got down to the whole app thing. Left myself out of it. I've been really stuck on where do I fit what I can do, in my role in this design fiction, and kind of threw that out the window. But then all of a sudden, all these ideas came out, and one of them being a stream app, for example. If we're looking at the health of the watershed system, and again, breaking it down to, those behavior changes that Mason had mentioned, which is kind of where we are, because we kind of all know not to, throw rubbish into the water and not to pollute things, but it's really on those individual everyday behavior types of things where I feel if we can make that impact, that would be great. So what about like a stream, like an app that, people can go online and learn about the different streams and how they're connected and how they're connected to themselves. They can donate materials, support, they can get their neighbors together. And, there's programs behind here in my, my design fiction where there's nonprofits and agencies that work with landowners so that communities can get together and just start to feel more ownership the waters, you know, the natural resources right around the area, particularly their streams and such. I'm thinking about Waikomo Stream in Koloa, for example, and you know, just it's super sad. When we were kids, we used to swim in there, and there are some really important cultural sites along that way. And now I'm seeing you know, shopping carts in there and people just dumping rubbish and, you know, wanting to clean it up, but how, you know, how useful will that be once in a great while? And then it kind of blossomed from there into like a social currency app is where I ended up actually. So long story short, you know, as we move into the future, and we've always been talking about other ways that currency is more than money for exchange of goods. How do we then implement some type of app or some kind of system where, you know, like the things that you do, the things you volunteer for, the ways that you save money and you upcycle, are somehow counted toward your social currency in order to get exemptions, discounts, and other, you know, other ways and then it becomes more of a, like with regular currency, a competition for lack of a better phrase, community Samaritanism.
Right.
And yeah, long story short, again, all over the place, but that's kind of started with the ants and the flowers and the spiders and kind of ended up with a stream and social currency type of app. And in the future, you know, people are using that as much as they would use currency or manage their own financial look. It's like, look at all the things I can contribute to and look how that can help back for me and my family and my community type of thing. Awesome. I don't know how that's working, but that's where I am.
No,
Sorry.
this is good.
Okay,
no, Leah, this is awesome. I think one of the things I want to parse out of that is I see this a lot with designers, is like this desire to quickly want to go to what you want to design and not spending enough time on what do you want your design to do. And what I love is like you've actually, in your exploration, I heard what you want your design to do, and you started to get into the design work as well, which is fine. But that's really what we're going to do in this next phase. So what I heard though is like what you want your design to do. It's like a deep connection and interaction exchange with the river systems. And that's like, to me, your design fiction is like, how do we like interact with water? Almost like it's like the bloodline. It's like it's the source. It's the currency. And today we'll talk about, you know, small ways we can start to move towards that design fiction. But I just want to bring that to the forefront. Like for this activity, I really want to know, what do you want your design to do? Or what do you want your activity or intervention to do? Because that's like the design fiction. It's like, I want my community to be more connected, or I want my connection to water to be deepened so that we're treating it with respect. So yeah, I just want to pull
that's
this apart.
perfectly, you know, I went from systems organization basically to cellular intelligence, and I see like the person or the family being that cell. Yeah. And I want that cell to find ownership and more automatic responsibility and interaction with the outside world. So how do we get to the people level, you know, and be with them every day? Well, that would be, you know, your cell phone or your device type of thing, and connecting them out to not just people like Facebook, but their surroundings, and making them feel a little bit more connected and owned, and knowing that there's a community, you know, the entire community does it like they do with Facebook, basically.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. Anyway.
Cool. That's great. Thank you very much. Bria or Leora, do you want to go next?
I can go. I'm still having trouble with my board. I don't know if it's like my system. So, but as far as the designing, this goes in my head, like designing the purpose and what I would want my design to do. It's rooting down, it's rooting I'd say getting deeper into my roots,
Yeah.
into our roots and culture. So, and for me, like Vai and just Vai Collective, which is our business and our gathering space, but also Vai and what that means. So what has come up for me this past week is water, and how important that just has always been because of where I was raised, and the indigenous parts of me of knowing what water, how important it is. So I guess for me it's just wanting to really get into the work of protecting that, and here at where in my place, using where I'm at to deepen and expand. So I want the work, everything that I do, to be designed around this. Like I think I've talked about, I'm this way at home, I'm this way in
Right.
business and trying to design. So I feel like I'm getting closer to what is like what am I protecting? Where am I protecting? This area, this
Mhm.
region. Just pick I I am picking it. I'm gonna say that it's the design looks in this Kaua'i area and up down this valley in Keapana. We don't know how long any of us is gonna be here. So I I have this opportunity with family to grow something there. And what that looks like is like like a healing grounds and growing for sustainable food, and also figuring out what our water, I'm talking really loud. I feel like I'm echoing in this building. What our water is like, kind of partnering. I feel like there's partners that I've met that I need to partner with in order, like our reef guardians, and start to protect like just one river, one stream.
Mm.
I don't even know to learn the names of this of the streams here. And then there's one that I'm always at. I walk by it. I like I'm always there. So I pick up garbage. Like I want to make a bigger, however it is. And maybe my impact isn't super huge. It's groundwork. I'm probably like I know we have to do some design work and get into the computer, but I really want to put my hands in the dirt, my hands in the water, and start to like rally, get with the people that have already doing some of this work, and then start, that avenue. So I'd say, and it's building where what I'm building at my cousin's farm, that it's much more with all of this in mind,
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that we're taking in, that now I'm so much more equipped. We are more equipped and expanded and deepening to the roots of what I keep hearing and seeing and being around. And just in like 30 days is I went to Oahu this past weekend, is the history, is looking back into the kapuna that were here and are still around, and we can still have access to all this wisdom, and that I maybe have not been using it to the full abilities that I have. I feel like I'm more aware of my abilities and am empowered to start empowering, and where it is that I focus. And that I would say is this region, this Ahupua'a, because I'm home and what I can do here.
Wow.
So that looks to me like those things, like watering and farming, water, protecting our water and farm, and helping it grow here. So equipping all of our people with, what we're doing. Summarizing, but I need to put it in there. And I found pictures. I have like pictures that I want of the valley that we're at, and I can start to kind of design. I tried to play with the AI thing and it didn't quite work for me, but it's coming. I feel like I'm just envisioning it and seeing your board and how this is coming, the design, how it's coming together. It's
Cool.
coming. I can't wait to get it on into the design and see how it functions and start serving.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the vision, and I really heard something similar to what Peleke talked about last week, which is like your intention of building community or like relationship to place and spending time at the rivers and getting your hands in the dirt and really learning the story of like what is here right now, but also learning from Kapuna to know like what was here. And I think I want to encourage you in this next week to think about like if you were to practice this for 40 years, like what do you see the outcome being? Like try to imagine you put this practice into place where you start to connect, like what would be the ultimate goal, or like what would you love to see? And that's what I want to encourage you to connect with on the design fiction, is like what's the possibility that could occur because you're doing these things, because you have a beautiful trajectory and I can see it, but I would love for you to define where you think it could go.
Mm-hmm.
Is that cool?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I already think I have the ideas, but I'll define it so I can speak it and design it.
Perfect. Yeah, I love it. This is I want to just I pulled up this slide again because upon visiting Kauai, this is where I saw the riches of this island. Is that growing up in Canada, where Indigenous people were, it's been called a cultural genocide. Like we as settlers consciously did our best to, as they say, kill the Indian, which is what the Prime Minister said. So when I came to Kauai and I could see, some of these stories that were still alive, it's like overwhelming to just imagine what people have gone through, what Indigenous people have gone through, but just like how fortunate you guys are to still have stories. And I bring this up because this adaptive cycle, and a lot of the stories are lost. I'm not denying that, but there is something that you're pulling on, these ancestral memories, these connections to place, and that is what this adaptive cycle thing does here, is that you have access to these old stories, these Indigenous ways of being that can help you reconnect with the land in a unique way. Me as a settler, like I've lost probably all my Indigenous connections from like northern Scotland and Scandinavia, and I'm just like trying to relearn from what I can find in the internet. But that's what I find the richness of Kauai, is that there's still hope, there's still connection, and that's what's going to help your adaptive cycles, is that you have these lines of remembering to draw on. And even if it's like subconscious, like it's just in your genes and you're like connecting with the spirits to find them, there's a real powerful opportunity to create these revolts, and really bring those intuitions and those Indigenous traditions back up to the surface. That's how I see it as a non-Indigenous person to your island, for sure.
Wow. That's so rich.
Yeah, that's why I love the bye-bye. Yeah.
Just then how you explain that too.
Bria, would you like to go next?
Sure. I had a chance just to research, I think, a little bit more around what it looks like to have buildings act as living organisms, and just examples, I think, of some of what's happening out there. And like when I think of it in nature, of like, I'm like I have like a peaked interest, I guess, in shapeshifters. I took my daughter this last weekend out to like Lumahai, and like the sand was all shifted around like pretty dramatically. And I live on the south side, so I don't get up North Shore that often. But so just thinking like, okay, what are examples of shapeshifters? Like how could that inform a building that's like a living organism? And then huge conversations these last 2 days around spreadsheets, budgets, RFPs, which is like a totally different system. but maybe not because yeah, like what would that look like to not be so committed up front? Because nature doesn't commit up front. So I don't know. I have like my brain's mushy today, so I'm not as like clear. I probably have more questions, but you know what I can do? I did put in words, I think, here in my board. I'll just read this. I think this is sort of the beginning. Oh my gosh, I cannot. I have to be the most okay, wait, hang on. Okay, so I said a space that acts like a living organism, and like examples, expanding and contracting, waking up and winding down, communicating through all the senses, hosting a variety of visitors throughout the day, embodied stories through scars, evolving expressions through color and shape, adapting through the seasons, grows and launches seeds, forever transforming and adapting.
Those are awesome. I really like the language for a design fiction because I have no idea how to do that, but to create the visual.
Some chords here. No, that's so sweet.
Okay, this is gonna be good. I'm gonna.
But I think what you're doing is like you're creating a visual that like I know for people is really inspiring. Like there's a couple I wrote down, the scars, like winding up, slowing down. There's like I think all of those are really powerful. Would you mind sharing them in the chat maybe?
So beautiful.
Sure. Oh,
So that we
man.
could see.
Yeah.
Okay, Jamie. Okay.
Awesome. So it's like the design fiction could also be like an imagine if statement. You could think of back to Ray Anderson, who's like, imagine if a carpet company continued to increase revenue while producing zero waste or using only the energy of the sun. Like that was his design fiction. And he figured out they figured out how to do it. And so the words that you're using kind of put me in that similar headspace. Like imagine a building that could expand and contract, that could host a variety of visitors, that embody stories through scars. Like it gives a really interesting visual to play with. And that's transforming our interpretation of a building, and it's challenging those Western kind of assumptions that we talked about earlier. A building that is stable, that separates the outdoors from the indoors, that is like prescriptive, and it's really like a challenging those old assumptions. So for now, this is great. And we're going to talk about how to get there. That's like kind of the goal of this next phase. Any comments on that, guys, or even Leora's, or what you've heard so far?
I don't know if you folks heard me, but I got all teary-eyed when Bria read her thing. And I was reading it because she has it up on her screen. So like I felt like I read the words and I listened to her and I feel her passion. I'm fully inspired too. It struck some chords with me. Is in the little time that I've known her and the work, everything she's put into here and her just in, your life, what you've put into you and developing everything you have going on. I'm like, oh, wow. So beautiful. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you for sharing that with us and asking her to copy that and paste it and share it. It's just very, it's so raw and like real and very impactful words that I think a lot of people it's just what people need. Our world needs. Our buildings need. Yes, it would be nice, like you say. How does that look? Well, we can begin this to imagine and design and try.
Yeah. I love what you said, Laura, and one of the things that I like about this platform and this course is that when we all find our niche, it takes away this fear of sharing. Like in a competitive environment, when you share your intellectual property, it's like there's a risk somebody could steal it or like take it. But when you're grounded in like your Kuleana or like what you're here to do and what your niche is, I kind of lose that fear because you'll never do it as good as me. Like if you're a beetle, you'll never be a mosquito like me. And so there's a freedom to share, but also this is our chance to create symbiosis and like mutual relationships. It's like, hey, Bria's Kuleana or her vision is like to go that way. How can we support her? How could we be that like those birds that sit on the back of rhinos' backs and eat the ants off the rhino so that the rhino doesn't get pissed off. So as you're listening to these design fictions, a part of why we wanted to share is to see like how your genius could contribute to other people's. So obviously like my bias is like Kaua'i, like maybe he's got some crazy ideas of how do you make buildings celebrate scars. That's what I want you to think. And like, you don't have to be an architect. Maybe you have an idea that's the genius is like, I often say the genius is in the commons. It's like when we're all working together and we're not afraid of sharing because we all know kind of why we're here. It creates a space for symbiosis, for cooperation. And that's what I want to foster in today's and really moving forward. So as you're listening, think about that. How could you support these visions? Awesome. Anything else you want to say, Bria?
Nope.
Okay.
I should have just started with that. Actually, that's probably the most clear thing I have to share today.
That's great. Thank you. Awesome. Paleke, how are you feeling, man?
Rambled. They like trying to catch up.
Yeah.
I feel like the last times I've been on my phone trying to keep up with the stuff, so it's on a computer, kind of get to see a little bit better when you post
Right.
the things.
Yeah.
I was trying to look for that map. What is that thing called? Canvas or?
Oh, the mural board.
Mural.
This thing.
Yeah, like I'm trying to search through the emails to see how to get on that, or do we all have our own?
I'll send you the instructions. You just have to go to Miro.com and you can set up a board. And then if you invite me, I can put this together for you. So as soon as I'm like attached to your board, I can set this all up for you if you want it.
So yeah, sorry for wasting everybody's time, but
No,
I
it's
will
fine.
try my best for
Like, I don't feel bad. I literally just got into my Miro board and was like adding comments this morning before the kids woke up. So you're not behind. We're all moving at our own pace.
Totally. Yeah.
Glad you're here.
Yeah, just really kind of like playing off what we shared last week. Yeah, see, while I was listening to everybody else's one, I wasn't even getting into my own. So like, I got pulled out of there, trying to suck myself back in to be ready. But
yeah, it's all right if you want, like, yeah, take a moment, just take a breath and reconnect to like. I remember your stories of last week of like walking with the land and learning where the water was, where the water wanted to go, and letting the pace kind of not dictate the pace, like kind of let the pace dictate your actions.
and our main sharing today is off of our niche again, or
Yeah, I think today we're gonna like what I'm trying to see is like I want to see what if you keep doing the work that you're doing, let's say for 50 years, where do you think it's going to end up? Like, what does that world look like? you know, maybe your grandkids or grandkids are now in this world. What are they experiencing? And be bold in that. Like really imagine like true success. Like what are you trying to do?
I guess for me, playing off of that is more focus on the art of Uhahu Hawaiian dry set masonry, and how that starts to connect with different food systems, and the olelo no eao off of it. Many different olelo no eaos, but one Ulava Mako i Kapohaku that was written in one of the songs that for the queen when we're getting for the overthrow. Saying we are satisfied with the rocks. Lava Mako i Kapohaku Kaikamaha o Kaina. That we can survive off of our pohaku. Like we don't need your palapala, the papers in order to survive. So it's like, but there's many other rock proverbs that play off of that. But then as I share that knowledge of weaving the rocks together, that template gets multiplied over many spaces, that in turn that creates that foundation for people to start saving food spaces, to start opening up their foundation or their grounding to be able to know how to kilo the water, the ocean, the fish, the things that use it, including ourselves, and how it's affected by the other elements, would be the moon, our seasons, and then it's kind of like giving everybody a base point or foundation that they can rely on to be able to get to those. Like that is the microscopic realm right now for us, but then it goes bigger into the Ahupua'a system and the land. But being able to have those confidence within everybody to understand why we do these things and why why some of those places lasted for these, over 1,000 of years, and how we can make it continue on for another 1,000 is kind of where my headspace been and what I've been doing. Yeah, and then as we fine tune in certain spaces, then we start diving deeper. If you like lokoi'a, why is the lokoi'a important? Why are we building this rock wall for the lokoi'a? Why is the lokoi'a important? What type of lokoi'a do we have? And then it just starts, the matrix just starts building up from there, and everybody brings it back up and have more confidence of protecting and serving that space without. How do we do this without money? How do we continue to sustain it and say like, hey, it's good to have a job for it and be paid to do it, but it's not if, but when that money falls apart, who can still like hold ground and keep it alive and be satisfied with whatever that pohaku starts feeding you with, whether it be the fish or cooking with it, protecting you, or using technology for today, but just those basic needs. At least, but yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like I get a hard time just pinpointing one thing, but if I had to pinpoint them back down, we just back to that art in order for it to go back up.
Yeah, man. Sorry.
In a nutshell.
It's so powerful to hear you speak because you take us on the journey of the adaptive cycle. It's like you're talking about what you're doing today, and then the description you had of like why you're trying to do it is so really I want to say profound, because what I heard is that you're laying the foundation for the next generation to live sustainably for another couple thousand years. It's like you're really reintegrating these old ideas that are proven so that your great grandkids, if this economic system fails, which it tends to do, still have food, still have a job, still have a place in their community. And the vision, like the design fiction that I'm hearing as you're speaking is like, it's really profound. It's like, it's going back to, like it's moving forward, but it's bringing those principles of the past so that you're laying a foundation that can thrive again for thousands of years. That's proven to thrive for thousands of years. Because otherwise it's like, when I think of that, I'm like, the models that we're currently using, whether it's like capitalism or whatever, it's like, they're not proven, like they don't have the track record. So we're just, and then like AI and the tech we're using now, it's like, there's no track record, we're making it up. So like, what are we basing it on? And of course we're nervous because we have no history with it. So I just think like what you telling these stories and talking about the ancestral knowledge, and putting it into the foundation of the systems that will sustain us is like, I can clearly see it. So I appreciate you sharing. Any other comments or perspectives? I'm going to just write down kind of my thought for you, Paleke. That's like how I see your design fiction. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Paleke?
No, just more confirmation if I'm explaining that right to hit.
Yeah.
With the activity of for what we're trying to form.
Yeah.
And I can get messed up in my head because I can dive one way and then like, oh wait, pull it back, and then go to another route and then pull it back. But
no, it's totally clear. The trick I'm trying to what's difficult is I'm asking people to jump way to the future. But like I said, what you did is like, you're talking about what you're doing today and you took us to the future, which is fine. Because I really want to see where people are trying to take us. Like the work that you're doing, where are you going? Because if I know where you're going, I can help you better. And I think we can all help you better.
This is a really good exercise because I'm such in the habit because of the type of work I do, and also as a mother, to immediately going into fixing things, like you said.
Yeah.
Very solution-based, that's what planners do. But I think that's a fight a lot of times between the creative self and the practical daily self, to just step back. And I wanted to just thank Bria for reminding us that there's some time. I love what you have. It inspired me. I wrote a poem already. So thank you. I was so inspired I had to stop. But in remembering that it's just about sometimes just ideas kind of flowing without a particular solution or fix on it. And so like the work too that we're always, I feel like, just like trying to keep up and fix for the future. In the future is based on all the energy we're putting out now. So on my mirror board, I'll just put it down. And my mind went back to my original creative core, which has been a lot of energy, which is funny because a lot of my art has been reflecting that energy before. So thank you. How do we capture energy? How do we use energy, personal and around us?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Leah. The other reason, like, this is more, when I do this exercise with other, companies or people, maybe who aren't indigenous to their place or who aren't pulling on, nature-based principles, it's so important to know what to know what assumptions are driving your actions. That's why it's good to go do the design fiction and embed the principles that you want, because it's kind of like, imagine like you're on a ship and the principles are your steering wheel. Like if you're not aware of what principles are driving the ship, you're just going to go in the same place you've been going for the last 200 years or 100 years or 10 years. Like if you don't stop and think like what principles do I want to be guiding my future? Because that's why, like, if you think of traditional engineers, like if they don't stop and think, they're going to keep designing systems that separate humans and nature. They're going to keep building systems that try to control or resist nature, and that's going to just get more expensive, and it's a waste of time. So this design fiction is a chance for us just to pause and think, hey, what ideas and principles do we want leading us to the next generation? And I think it's so valuable because we're literally, what we're doing today is literally setting the foundation for our grandkids and our future generations. So if we're not aware of what's driving it, then we're kind of hurting them inadvertently. So that's why I think biomimicry is so powerful, because it's like, I'm going to keep drawing on principles of nature because it's the only model that's been doing this for 3.8 billion years. So she knows better than I do. So I'm not going to pretend I know how to get us to the future. And it's amazing. Like I just had somebody from my team in Australia this morning challenge biomimicry, and I was like, buddy, yeah, just very interesting perspective, because he's an engineer and he wants to keep, doing these designs that don't work for nature. So it's my challenge to figure out, how do I convince him to think otherwise, to embed new principles in his actions so that we can be more harmonious with nature. Leonie, are you, I'm just wondering if you're back. I know he was on a call. He mentioned he was on a call with a client. Sounds like he's not. Okay. Keone, are you there? No problem. So what I wanted to do next was I wanted to explore kind of, once you have your design fiction, I want to like bring it back to the ground and figure out, okay, how do we move forward with that like bold vision, that bold idea of where you're going, and how can we work together to get there? I'm just going to give you examples. This is an old presentation, but examples of design fictions that I presented to European healthcare. And then we came up with solutions. And so I'll give you an example. So light is a big thing in healing. And we're like wondering, like, how do you bring light into more patients' rooms in hospitals so that they can connect with nature? And I've always been inspired by the dappling light of a forest canopy. And so we just came up with strategies of like, what if the floors, like floor plates, were, plexiglass, and you could have like the light at least trickle down through taller buildings. We use polar bear to kind of inspire, how do you bring light deeper into a building? And polar bear hair is translucent and it pulls light to the skin of a polar bear is black. So it pulls like the heat in. And so we thought, like, what if we played with fiber optic cables and we're able to pull that light in deeper into a building? And there's already like precedents and examples, so like you can play with this. We wanted to build a tower that was, copying the footing of a mangrove. So this is in Thailand, in like a really like dynamic delta. So how do you like build buildings in dynamic sand? And then we used dragonflies to help us. Yeah.
Are you sharing a screen?
Oh, sorry.
I'm not sure if I could see it.
No,
There.
no.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, so here's the dappled light.
Hello.
Here's the polar bear example where we're pulling light in. Thank you, Plucket. This is the tower that you were looking at mangroves to make more efficient footing, and then a structure. What's cool is like we're able to figure out how to use a lot less material by copying the dragonfly wing, because we needed less structural concrete. So these are the design fiction, like, and I encourage you to use these in your practice, because they help people see what you're trying to get at. And then today I really want to talk about how do we get there? How do we get that small scale release that might lead us to the next kind of iteration? So what I want to do today is we've done this with Bria and Mason in the past, but as a collective, I want us to start to think like a weed. So now that we know where we're heading, like we've got our North Star, we've got like our strategy, our vision. What's the first step we can do today that might get us there? It's like, what's your first paddle stroke? And what I like to do is think like a weed, meaning nature is very entrepreneurial. Like there's nothing in the built environment where nature's not like, yeah, I could leverage that. Like if you think of, if you knew bower birds will collect like little plastics and things and make like beautiful nests to attract their mates. Pigeons find holes in concrete and tubes. Dandelions will see a crack in the pavement and think that's a great spot for a home. So nature's like very entrepreneurial in how it leverages things. So we've come up with our design fiction. Now I want to figure out what's our small scale intervention. And maybe some of you guys are already doing this, but maybe there are other ways, other things we can harness to come up with a strategy. And I'll give you one example before we dig into kind of collaborative work. This is one of my students. His design fiction, back when I taught it a while ago, his design fiction was like, how do cities hold rain like a forest? Because cities are designed to like let rain hit it, quickly move down, and then flash flood out into the lake or into the rivers. If you think of a forest, like every leaf knocks that, like gets hit by that raindrop and absorbs the energy and slows down. And in some good forests, the rain doesn't even hit the ground. So that was his design fiction. And then his thinking like a weed, he was walking to school one day and he's just looking at the sides of buildings. And he's like, man, what if these buildings could slow rain down? Like, what if they could capture rain a bit? And if you look at trunks of trees, like I'm looking at a birch tree right now, or a spruce tree, like the rough trunks create this like opportunity to slow water down. So he designed this as his like entry point. This is like his first phase to get to his design fiction, is to create these panels that capture rain, and they're modular, so you can move them around based on which side of the building gets the most rain. You can move them into patterns and shapes that are most effective at capturing the rain. And they just slow the rain down, and they actually like were designed to self-cool the building. So this is an example of like a thinking like a weed, and ways to get to his design fiction. And that's what I want to explore today, is how do we get to your design fiction? And what I want us to do is, as a collective, maybe we'll do a couple examples, is like start to think of what technologies are out there, what people, what resources, who could we contact tonight? Like maybe I could set you up with a contact and you call them and say, hey, I've got this vision. Could you help me get there? So I want us to think of what are the things that are out there that we can harness and leverage to get your idea to come to fruition quicker. Does that make sense? Maybe we'll do I'll open it up first and see like if there's anything that people heard in other people's stories that they're like, oh, I've got a contact or I've got an idea. We'll just open it up kind of like popcorn style. Anyone can go. And then I'll bring it to some structure, but I just want to open it up first.
Can you say the question again?
Yeah, for anyone who shared today, their design fiction, like, do you have any resources in your network that might support them and their vision?
I don't know if this counts. This might be way off, but Leora was talking about water.
Yeah.
And about wanting to make a bigger impact than just the cleaning of it. And I just wanted to FYI, and you guys probably already know that the One Water Honolulu project is really trying to build a collaborative framework on Oahu for tackling just that. I mean, the Board of Water Supply already has a great neighborhood stream cleanup, but there's issues, of course, with jurisdictions. There's large landowners. There's our natural systems, our traditionally created systems, you know, for lo'i, kalo and stuff. And then there's the modern infrastructure systems. And these all go together well. One Water's trying to map that and trying to identify, you know, the partners and the collaborators that are related to it, so that when it goes down to the community level, it's a little bit more people will know and have the opportunity to participate and know that they're part of a larger project that, you know, like everybody's kind of working together a little bit more. And I'm hoping and I'm excited about being part of the project now through work for what it would mean for Kaua'i. So I just wanted to mention that they're rebranding themselves, and my part in it was to basically go through about 50 different plans in the last 25 years and pull out all the collaborative, all the community values and all the projects that were required for every moku on Oahu, and organize all of that stuff. So like, it'd be great if we could do it for Kauai too, but you know, it is a model that, you know, once it's done on Oahu, that we could just take a look at, even if it's just for a region, to test it out. So yeah, I don't know if that's where the question was going, but
yeah, this is great, Leah, because it's like really the key to like this exercise is to think laterally, like any connection points. It could be anything. Even, and I'll give you an example. Like when you were speaking about connection to water, I was curious if there's like Hawaiian language or Hawaiian traditions that sees water in a different way. And what I mean by this is I had an indigenous elder teach me that, you know, they call trees standing people, and they talk about the spirit of trees and then also the spirit of fire. And she had me do like a 4-day fast where I didn't eat or drink, and I just stayed with a fire. And in that time, it was like I got deeply connected to what a spirit of a fire. Before that, I was like, there's no spirit in fire, it's just a fire. But when you spend 4 days and that's all you're doing is looking at a fire, it gave me a totally different perspective. And when she called trees standing people, it totally changed my relationship. Now, when I cut a tree down, it's like it's more ceremonial. I'm cutting a life. Like it changed my whole perspective. And so I say this because, you know, if you want to connect with water, I guess for both Leora and Leah, you know, maybe there's like ways of thinking about the language you use around it, or how to connect people to water in a deeper way where it's like ceremony. Yeah.
I think Mason and Peleke would have that. But you know, cocoa is, or blood probably is the one that I'm most familiar with. That it is the blood of the land. It's our blood. It flows through us. It's also part of us. But I don't know if Mason and Peleke have much better examples.
And no, that makes sense.
It'd be cool, Leah, if there's like if there's a way to organize people to connect to that. Like if there, I don't know, if it's a workshop or like an event where people can experience water as bloodline, like to shift their perspective or shift their relationship. It could even be like a meditation and like, I don't know. Just something. That's the one thing I was present to, is like how to change people's experiences with their environment.
Yeah, the life force energy again.
Yeah.
Things seem to keep going back to energy for me.
And that's pretty universal. The other way to look at it is like what you put into the water or cocoa. Like cocoa is like a type of way too, but um and get all those scientific projects that help prove them out. Like when you're
Yeah.
talking the same water, where you talk bad to one and talk good to the other one, and they look inside the molecules, or they freeze it and then it freezes totally different ways. Like we kind of do that with all our way, like making sure that we have different chants for water.
Yeah.
To acknowledge where they come from, where they're at, even if we can assume. That's how we conduct ourselves around them. Whether it be fresh or salt. Even
Yeah.
when we make Kaua'i, I know it's not talked about much in depth, but Kaua'i is like we use it for eat or for food, like preserving food, but also the protection side of Kaua'i, and how that Kaua'i actually gets more mana when you put that energy into it while it's still kai, while it's still water form, and that molecules, at least the science stuff, you'll show that you chanting every day on top of that kai, as it turns hard into Paukai, it holds that type of energy to Pale when you need it for those spiritual protection times or anything else. But depends on the kind of energy you hold while you're forming that Paukai. So I used with the kids, when my kids they'd watch the second Frozen, and I used that as an analogy for them to like listen what Olaf said about ice, and the water holds memory, and that's what
Yeah.
the ice did, and held the memory in that way. So it's like kind of take that and transform that back into everything else we do with the way, whether we're growing food inside of it or making salt of it or in your own body. So we may gotta watch out myself when I'm yelling at them or scolding because I'm so frustrated, and 6 kids running around. It's like, okay, I cannot be putting that kind of bad energy onto the other
Yes.
kind. Yeah. So, yeah. Sorry, I know I brought it a little bit off, but kind of just started sparking.
No. It's great, Mason, or Paleke. Thank you for sharing. And for Leia and Leora, it's like as you listen, just start to like, what I like to do is like think like an entrepreneur. Is like how could you use those stories, or how could you like share those stories so that people can get enrolled in your design fiction, like where you're trying to go? Because ultimately you want people to have a new relationship with water. And maybe there's ways of thinking of like, yeah, like using the Frozen is a great example, Pleke, of kids connect to that. Kids learn from the movies. So yeah, just think creatively. This is their chance to think really outside the box. Hey Mahina, thank you for joining us.
Sorry for being coming on late.
No worries. We've just so you know, we've shared the first step was we just shared our design fiction where we're at. And today we're kind of going from the big vision. What are some steps that we can take today that could help us get to that big vision? Maybe you're already doing it, but what I want to do is encourage collaboration and cross connections to see how we can support each other. And maybe there's resources or contacts or thoughts that might fuel your pathway to your design fiction. I mean, thinking about yours, Paleki, I think what you're doing is like you are literally setting the foundation for this. You're building the systems again. I'm curious, like what I would love to maybe have a conversation about is how do we elevate the importance of infrastructure like a fish pond and make it more important than like trying to get a lot of money for one person. Because I think that's like one of our barriers is like we have an economic system that doesn't align with a traditional regenerative system. So I don't know, are there examples out there where we've seen communities rally around something like a fish pond, or like how do we elevate the importance of a fish pond?
Definitely been a
I think
newer renaissance within the past 20-ish years, but where communities are
Yeah,
getting more and more involved with understand, like at least not totally understanding, but at least knowing that there's a need to save these spaces
yeah,
because the templates are there. The stories are slowly being uncovered. Uh, just getting the confidence of rebuilding it without um, worrying about funding and or permitting.
yeah.
One of the stuffs is that we've been learning is to share, hey, yeah, like if we never asked the question, we probably could, and we were restoring by hand, they probably wouldn't have said anything. But then that started a 20-year process of building a permitting process just to fix a puka in a wall.
Yeah.
And when we're balancing the spiritual side with that too, which I don't know where that fits in this space with natural nature stuff. So I think the spiritual side is on the other half. With friends that can see beyond the veil and transmit messages,
Yeah.
and balancing out like what the kupuna see and why we take it so long now to fix something so simple, like that they started. And it's like, yeah, all these craziness outside, and they're telling us why we take it so long. But definitely go back to your question of using the system as a part of how we rally up the kindness. Like, yeah, for me, I think it's still super brand new. Even though it's like 20 years it took for us to relearn.
Yeah.
But that's why it's a little like even more we gotta find natural confirmation, nature's confirmation to plus whatever we could dig up written, plus whatever we see going forward. But
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not making sense. But I feel like I understand certain scenarios and how to bring people into that understanding using today's
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah.
Saying like, okay, we like I usually have a 45-minute spiel on this, but I don't know how to break it down to an elevator speech of like using today's problems and then breaking it back down and kind of pointing fingers the other direction. Like, hey, we're only looking one way, but nobody tried to look this way too yet. Or it's not nobody, but we need more eyes looking this directions to make things
Yeah.
make sense and to show that the progress is not in the pond, not just in the pond, but also outside the
Yeah.
pond. And the
Yeah, I
fruitfulness
hear
for
that.
everybody to benefit off of. Yeah. Sorry.
Jamie, try ask the question again. Try ask the question again, Jamie. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, how do I say it? It's elevating the importance. How do we elevate the importance of the fish pond? Which doesn't show like potential like monetary value in a world where monetary value is like seemingly driving everything.
Yeah. Thank you. So yes, kako'o to everything that Peleke just shared. I think the things that I'm pondering is that there are some technical interventions, policy interventions, pilot kinds of, interventions. There's there are different public-private partnerships that are trying to do things differently to try and apply ancestral thinking and models and systems into, and then try and figure out how to, reconfigure the current systems that are broken, and need to be healed. So I think a big question is, I have a lot of different kinds of thoughts about this, but one question is, are we trying to replace using our ancestral systems and build and restore and bring all of our ancestral thinking and then upgrading it to
Right.
and including all of the new lessons and wisdoms that we continue to generate. So it's like, are we trying to, that's a big question esoterically, right, to all of us. Are we trying to replace, supplant the old system? Are we trying to heal the current system and find ways to work within and integrate? Or are we trying to incrementally apply ancestral wisdom, intelligence, ways of being into the current system in very, like at the county level, at the the private enterprise level, at the state level, at the federal level of America. So that's my big question. And to me, we haven't even got to, we have our conversations, like Peleke has these conversations. We all have conversations, all of us here on this call, probably in smaller circles, maybe in mid-sized circles, but the point is we're not having it as a people, right? As a collective. And to me, we are always going to have disclarity if we are not trying to figure out, like, what is that we're trying to do? Are we trying to do we all acknowledge that this system is taking us only so far, and it's brought some benefits, but it's also brought harm, and are we okay with it? And what are we trying to do about it? So I'm answering a question with a question.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you, Mahina. Yeah, I pulled up this model again because, like, I think, I like visual thinking, and I picture like knowing what ancestral knowledge to bring in, and then also realizing we're in a totally new context. So how do we like engage this context with like really fresh ideas, or how do we harness technologies or exploit, thinking? So it's like the fish pond really is in those ancestral kind of technologies I see as like these middle ones that are pulling on these old ideas, but really trying to shift systems. Maybe so Peleke, you mentioned like policy being a barrier, like funding being a barrier. Are there other like key barriers you're trying to innovate around? Or are those kind of the two big ones?
Those for like those who are in it for the job and trying to just restore the spaces, but also like it goes out to choke tanks, like in different fish ponds. Some of it's just the resources got diverted, the water, fresh water, and or polluted. But then holding that source of that damage accountable versus trying to readapt to what is there now.
Yeah.
All kind of dramas, but still staying confident that the system can clean itself too, and seeing other systems or hearing about other systems around the world similar to ours that don't realize that we exist, but it's like way bigger, but have proven that they have restored a place like that for the plants, the birds, the fish, and the people. And then just kind of trusting in that and push it forward and keep on planting the right seeds so that people see. Yeah. What Mahina was mentioning is like that's totally on our conversation garage beer time talk stories. I was like, what shucks, what is the word she said? I don't know. Things are sparking up. Like, yep, we always like how we innovate. Like for me, I was like, I'm kind of after being able to see other places and kind of study about the movements that happened within the past 100 years. Um, but realizing that we might have misinterpreted what the
Right.
local function is, and now
Yeah.
trying to fix it within this past 5 to 10 years, try to restructure it again to make it make sense. And then also realize like, hey, we cannot innovate on it yet if we never fully understand it good. And then maybe when I believe our kupuna already had innovated to the max already. We just are supposed to take the baton and pass it on, take care of it, and then pass the baton on to the next gen. But we got to reconnect that confidence, understand the system, and then see. Yeah, now we get technologies that our kupuna never have within the past 100 years that we could incorporate with this. That's gonna be our generation's innovations upon a system that, instead of having to kilo there every day and taste them, like we get gadgets that can tell us to the second when the salinity's changing or when the temperature's changing to help us save that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Save the function. But yeah. That's
It's interesting. As you're speaking, Paleke, I'm thinking of like up where I'm from. There's a lot of research and money going towards like fire research, like indigenous fire practices, which were very common in like Turtle Island, like over here. And because Canada, I think Mason, you said this crisis is an opportunity. That Canada and North, like all of America is like major forest fires, like massive forest fires. So people are looking for different solutions. So I was just thinking like maybe there's like a way of thinking about, just something if you could leverage there, maybe, I could connect you. I actually know somebody who's an indigenous woman who does fire teachings, and maybe it's like a chance if you want to connect with her and just hear like how does she get the support and how does she go through, because there's a lot of regulations about starting fires. So like there's a lot of like top down restrictions. Funding is a tough thing, but it's I don't know. If you're interested, I'd be happy to connect you with her.
No, yeah, that'd be awesome. I know at the time when we were burning mangrove, that was the time we were trying to research a lot of that too. And we did it one way at Heia, and it worked time wise, money and everything. And then our board, not see Mason, but our board went through a whole 6-month process to kind of study all the stuff, and then came right back around to like, okay, we'll do it. Like I said, okay, would have been done already with this, but I understood the concerns, like all the carbon release and everything like that, but wanting to mulch it and over burning. But one of the comments that was kind of funny that if we burn, we're going to cause a puka in the ozone layer. And I was like, man, if that was so true, then Big Island's going to fall out of like get sucked up into the sky with the volcano.
It's a giant fire.
Yeah. But then it's like, after the study with the methane and everything else, they say like, oh, it is better to just quick burn fast. So that's like pretty cool for the studies that been put up. The other one that would be helpful is how to measure phytoplankton bloom in the water and how that carbon sequesters do that carbon sequestry, because one of the fights was removing the trees from being able to do that.
Yeah, right.
But them not understanding that the brackish water and building that bloom in the water covers more ground than the mangrove and has that much more carbon sequestration happening within the space provided within the water versus the little growing in land. So that was that's a avenue we're trying to go on to if there's connections in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I'm sure there's some at Guelph, like where I'm from. It's I can check into that. I wanted to quickly bring this up, from that adaptive cycle, because what you're speaking to, Palake, like one of the things about the board and like going in these big loops, these are like 6 principles. I'm sure there are more. These are just things that I found helpful for like shifting rooted systems. Like, how do you deal with all these barriers? And I'm sure you're doing a lot of these, but I kind of wanted to just highlight them in case any of them spark some thinking. Like nature, everything is self-organized in nature. There's not a lot of top-down governance. Like, how do you encourage self-organization? I think some of you have even talked about this, of like getting community groups together. If you think of like the Airbnb example, that was a great example of self-organization. They just created an app for people to self-organize, and it like totally shifted the system. Like, I think you like live this, like create a culture of experimentation. And in nature, experiments happen often at small scales. Like they try something out, doesn't work, it might die out. But start small. This is one, like, avoid short-term thinking, conservation, and this is more for like maybe people I deal with. It's like a lot of thinking is like profit now. And conservation, I mean, people don't want change, so they're trying to conserve systems. They're trying to, like, that's why policies are so difficult. It's like, just don't mess things up. So how do we not mess things up? And that goes to this fourth point, which we talked about in the first class. Really acknowledging like the inherent fear, like a lot of why people think short term and try to conserve systems is just the fear of the unknown, the fear of change. And so how do we help people manage that fear, whether it's like showing case studies or doing some experiments at real small scale where the risk is lower? Like, you got to really think of the other person who you're trying to enroll or convince, and acknowledge their bias. I think that's like a pretty important point. They're just trying to avoid messing things up. Like, it's, they don't want change. They don't want disruption. And then like incorporating multiple layers of frequency of feedback. So that's another thing. Like, anyone in a relationship knows the more you communicate, the more calm there is between partners, because you're constantly like making sure you're thinking the same thoughts. So when we're doing innovation, and nature does this really interestingly, like it uses more than just language. It uses smells, it uses senses like touch. So how can you in your process engage in more communication to help people who are afraid of the change or who don't understand the change be okay with it? How do they get calm with it? So it's like almost over communicating. And maybe you could think of communication in a different way. It doesn't have to be like you have to talk to them, but maybe it's sensors, or maybe it's like somehow they're involved in the process. And then the last one, and this is kind of what we're doing right now, is look at like other assets. Like, what are other things in the world, whether they're technologies or people or resources or money, and like, how do you totally reconfigure them? This is, again, I really appreciate Airbnb as a model, or Uber, because they just looked at like empty cars and then reconfigured how they're used, and everyone like bought into it. So these are the 6 principles as you're thinking about, those small scale changes, or like, how do you shift towards your design fiction? These might help you in your process get there, because you're going to hit lots of barriers. A lot of the barriers are these old systems that are designed to protect and conserve and keep systems from not changing. And if you're doing something innovative, you're definitely going to bump up to all of those, because people don't want your innovation to necessarily change the way things are done. So how do you shift that system? And that's what, this adaptive cycle in nature could potentially teach us.
That's good. I feel like it's like I give little confirmation to how in trying to handle conflict. Which I don't think there's much. It's more like, but it's some like more in people's internal, not letting go and set the stuff out in front of them, and it's like, hey, you can judge for yourself if I'm bullshitting or not. And then usually people, if you can break it, they let me know so I can go back to the drawing board. If not, it's like, let's go together. This comes into personal, like, good. Like,
Cool. Rhea, I'm kind of curious to jump to yours because like your design fiction is really challenging traditional building practice. So
Thanks again, brother.
I'm curious, like if people have ideas or technologies or ways of like thinking, I'm going to pull up your thing again. Like, how could we actually reimagine or reconsider how buildings function? I mean, if we pick one, like I'll start with the waking up and winding down. Like the first thing I thought of is like building in circadian rhythms within the technologies. Like where you had lights that followed the sun. You could even have like set your air conditioning system to like get somehow like encourage people to wind down, like maybe make it warmer at the end of the day. Because I know when it's like gets super warm, you just like start falling asleep, or you want to find some shade. So it's like, you could think creatively, and those are like pretty cost effective. I don't think it would cost much to start to play with those, but yeah, I'll open it up to everyone else too. If like there's ways you could think about a building behaving differently.
I was, what Bria had kind of made me think about way back in the day. I'd say 20 years, but it was probably closer to 25 at this point. There was a project out, Mason might remember it, called the Waianae House. And it was a pilot project that was a partnership between Department of Business, Economic Development, Tourism, and a whole bunch of folks to build a house in Waianae that needed no air conditioning, that took complete, advantage of the the area, the orientation toward the sun, where the windows were, how they built the windows, and they were very successful in it. But it never went further than that because it was really costly at that time. It was kind of the first try, and everything that came out of it, the materials were too much. But some of these things in here was, again, embodying the stories of the scars for me was, how are we, again, recycling all this old actual wood that are, how are we really like honoring like the old materials that we have, and having different relationships to them, so that not everything has to be new, and that these things are really, like for the bee's knees, as far as modern architecture and interior design goes. I mean, it's kind of a thing, right, where old floors with scars and such are very valued nowadays. So I just made me think about it, that it can happen and it has happened. It's just getting behind them with the materials. Sorry, people are yelling outside of my house. Yeah, so anyway, just wanting to yeah. Color, shape, it was the house was positioned in a way that it took advantage of the sunset and the sunrise, so that those colors played off the walls inside of that building too. And it did not need air conditioning, and it was at least 10 degrees cooler than the house next door. Anyway, very encouraged.
I have the same problems when we're building traditional home in Halle. It's crazy because we have what's it called? A lot of the resources that we get, we still harvest, and it's not like going to Home Depot we can buy everything all set up. So it ended up costing a little more, which started realizing, oh, that switch, not everybody can get it easier. Like it's a little cheaper at the bigger companies, but how much more damage do they do around the world?
Right.
I mean, we get our natural ones, like we're trying to use invasive species because we hardly have our native ones, but how do we take out invasives and plant our natives, but also build a management plan so that it's more sustainable to because our homes weren't meant to, well, I guess because our elements weren't like lasting for like hundreds of years, but they were always like, whether they're water worn, we have a lot of wet weather, so we gotta switch them out a bit. But like when we look at Tahiti, a lot of their I never been, but my friend keep telling me if I go because of the Halle building, and every time he goes, he take pictures of their stuff, and they're still using traditional thatching on their roof because it keeps it cooler. It's also providing jobs. When they're weaving, like every 2 years, they're changing out coconut leaf panels. So it's it doesn't last as long, but there's many different thatchings that could last a little longer. Like Pili, we could see like lasts at least 20 years. So to have a 20-year every now and then changing grass that came out of the backyard, like helpful. And just the structure of using traditional Hawaiian architecture, like steeping up the roof higher so it is cooler. And then you have leaves that breathes better. Although we have different bugs nowadays too that we never had before. But in rock walls that help keep things cooler, insulation. But yeah, it's parts that we know from building traditional halles. And in the directions, facing an east side, face the sun, west side, face the setting. And it all helps. It's just in lighting. Also,
Bria, are you aware of like some of those things?
Well, actually, it's interesting because you and Pake had two different directions, and I was like, we just as a team went and visited the Living Building Challenge case study of the Energy Lab on Big Island. And I didn't realize this, but actually on the same campus is the Ossipoff church. And so when thinking about like, okay, in the technology that is available, automating things, having, I know like from interior architecture and interior design, there's like sensors that can, change lighting, change even like the glazing to allow sun in, and there's that side. And so there's a lot of that technology of in the energy lab, right? Like the way that air moves through, the way it's conditioned, how they've done stuff like that. I think it's net zero or net contributed or something like that. Like it's a pretty awesome project in that sense. And they monitor and there's a dashboard. But in the Ossipoff church, he designed it in a way, same thing, but that's like decades, probably 50 years old, I think. I got to look it up. I might be messing up, but so an old architect that designed with climate in mind and doing a lot of what I think Paleke, not to the extent of thatch roofs. That's like, I feel like even going further back of like a design that worked, but it was like you walked in there and it was in the middle of the day and it was cool. Oh yeah, Mason, you were there with, but like it was cool. And the way the lighting the sun came in a certain area, and even the acoustics. So that I don't know how they figured this out, but if you stood at the front of the church, the acoustics actually was amplified, so like you wouldn't need a microphone. So I was just thinking like, okay, yeah, so I don't really have like a conclusion, but my head just went two different directions because I was like, oh, we have all this technology. And then all of a sudden I'm also like, sometimes it's just so simple about like form and function and observation. Yeah, it's really interesting. It has me kind of like, my mind's kind of like, huh, okay, maybe it's like not as complicated or cost impossible. Yeah, looking at both avenues, but was that your question? Sorry, I just
No,
started
it's great. Yeah, it's
stream of conscious.
what I'd love for you to do is like on the mural board, maybe start to capture some of those, because you're right. There's like there's these two. There's traditional architecture, and then there's like emerging technologies. And when you map them out, and I think maybe this is your point, Mason, is like when you map them out, you can see which one fits at which time. Is that what you're meaning, Mason?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think our ability to, right, we're talking about getting to the tipping point of change, and that's dependent upon how much we plan for it. And oftentimes it's about timing, and when things are ready, whenever, Kupuna say it's ready. And so the work, as much work as we can get done. So when I think even going back to like the fish ponds and like what appeals, right? So the question was like, who are we appealing to? Well, it's a fixed mindset that has prevailed, that we're trying to change. That doesn't happen necessarily. I think we speak to that, but we stay firm in the principles that we're enlisting here. And for me, it's like that only happens, at least, well, it doesn't only happen, but I think it's in the preparation of building a capacity, the resource, and knowing that they're ready, so that when there's a question, when it's like, hey, we need this, then we are in a better place to provide those solutions from the perspective that we are advocating from.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, maybe Bria, have you been like mapping this? Like, do you have kind of a precedent catalog of ideas that have stuck with you?
I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, but I'm fascinated by spaces that adapt, and I don't think it's limited to architecture or buildings. I think it's any space that adapts, and has a responsiveness so that it's agile over time. I just think that's like an interesting concept. And then with adaptive reuse and regenerative design, like just kind of rethinking along a new paradigm. So I think there's like areas of research that are really fascinating to me. But then this idea of it's hard to step outside of probably my work and what's before me right now.
Right.
And so I'm like kind of sucked back into reality of like, just like you're saying, like, what are the simple steps you can test or try? And yeah, but I don't know. So that's why I think like I had to like scale way back and that's why I kind of wrote those lines of like, how is a space like a living organism? How does it like, what are examples of spaces that expand and contract, or, wake up and wind down, or host a multitude of variety throughout the day, and even in different seasons change, like some spaces are vacant in certain seasons and some seasons they're full, and that's okay. Like being full all the time is actually may not be the goal. Like so I'm just trying to like stretch my mind, I think, around these principles, and then honestly, like in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I want to go. Like at first I'm thinking I want to go study spaces like this, but then I'm like, no, actually I want to go, like I go to really personal, like a day in the life for myself. Like how does my own home, how do I wake up? What does my own home do? And I don't know if I'm really answering your question. It's hard because my mind goes in so many, it goes into personal, it goes into like global, it goes into philosophical, it goes into tactile. And that's why I think like even Leia, I empathize with you because I'm like, is that just what happens when you're a creative? You're like, pew, 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 pew. You're like, I'm exhausted. But not to like resist the overwhelm because that's a little bit of just the journey of, yeah, the process of creativity. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe it's like when you say ideas or did you say library? I thought you said something about accumulating
Yeah, like a catalog.
a catalog. Yeah. That overwhelms me
Yeah.
to think of that because there's like such complexity back to the slide you keep taking us to of like systems within systems within
Yes.
systems.
Right.
Um, and so yeah, when I think of the catalog, is it, yeah, maybe it's not super filtered other than maybe these are the categories, just the line by line that I wrote, and I look at examples of that, or maybe they cross-reference um, and there's probably like a high-tech version and a low-tech version of each one, maybe too. Could be really interesting to study.
Yeah. I think you're
Is
right.
that what you meant? Or sometimes I feel like I'm out in a different headspace. Is that what when you say catalog, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, just like if when you see something like the church on Big Island, like just snapshot, take a picture of it and put it on your mural board so that you're like, oh, that was like an interesting way of cooling a building. Like those vernacular technologies are genius.
Actually, I think the Energy Lab uses the venting system from I think Osipov patented it. It was like instead of louvers, like you know how jalousies are installed vertically, typically, right at the base of a window. It's really standard here. Like any house you get, there's almost always jalousies. That is the heating and cooling system, low tech. But Osipov took that and turned it horizontally. And it's oftentimes the windows have deep sills and they have this horizontal like jealousy. And what happens is when you do it that way, it actually sucks up it, and especially if it's on the I guess you'd say north side or at least the wind side of the building, it sucks up cold air actually and runs it across the ceiling and then cools your whole space. And so the Energy Lab actually, that's how they ventilate like their conference room. And it shows up in, I think it's actually at the NTBG library too. Yeah, Mahina, you're shaking your head. So you've seen it then too. Yeah, it's like simple but super effective, right?
Cool.
Yeah, my understanding is because my uncle was a mentee of Osipov, he's an architect, and my understanding, and my uncle wrote some books around Hawaiian architecture, traditional Hawaiian architecture and stuff. So my understanding is that Osipov based a lot of his design for the ventilation around traditional hale and halo systems. So yeah, that's my understanding.
That's amazing. Can you say that again? The systems that you're saying, I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, so hale, so thatch hale. I mean, there are different kinds of hale, right?
Yeah.
Like you can speak to that, and halo, which are longer houses, thatched houses as well, and the orientation, and then so designed to do exactly what you had shared for the cross ventilation and so forth, and even the Peleki can speak to it more, but even with the ili like system, so how we set our foundation, our house foundation, there's a cooling effect as well, keeps the houses really cool. And you'll see it too in older the old houses that are built either with coral or with pohaku. They still have that effect. that still exist, less and less now because they're all placed under the historic registry, and it's super hard to like maintain them because it's expensive and all the code. But yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm just honoring the time. I know we're at capacity here. Yeah, I really thank you. So I'll send some notes in the WhatsApp, but I'm going to encourage you to, if you like, get your design fiction, down or somehow captured. We're going to keep looking for ideas or examples. I think, Bria, you've got 2 amazing contacts in Peleca and Mahina to learn about this vernacular technology. Start to look at like things that might inform your design. But the big thing I'm going to encourage you to do, and this is going to be helpful for us as a group, is write down some of the big barriers or the friction points that you're working with, because that's where we're going to want to innovate. We want to be strategic in where we innovate. And so when we know where the friction is, then we can work together. So that's the big thing, is like create a list of like where your friction points are. And let's see if we can work as a collaborative to smooth those out, sand those down.
The codes, like Mahina said.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Anything anyone wants to say to just complete this time together? Okay. If not, I thank you so much for all your participation and your sharing. From here on in, it's like we're really going to start to dig into how do we move your design fictions forward? How do we get to them? So we'll do it step by step. But mahalo, thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
We hope.
Hello.
Well,